Hi everyone, we might kick off if you could take your seats, looking at two people in particular. Thanks all. I hope you had as good a conversations as I did over lunch. One of the benefits of all coming together on this annual conference is that ability to connect with people you might not have met before, but see people that you often see only on a screen or hear as a voice on the end of the line. So congratulations for taking advantage of the networking opportunities. I'm going to hand over back to Pete in a sec because he's a much better MC than I am. But I just did want to come up and give you a little bit. Pete was very sort of, gave a bit of a teaser beforehand. So I just wanted to let you know what the change is to the program. You will have seen that we did have a planned closing keynote on shaping Queensland's future visitor economy. And on the program, we were going to have the lovely Emma from the tourism industry, Queensland Tourism Industry Council, so QTIC. We were going to be privileged to have Tash Wheeler, the CEO, come. She really wanted to come and meet some of you and address the group. But one of the times she saw me walk out of the room before was her calling to say her flight had been cancelled. And so she was going to arrive after we would all have left. And so not much point in that. So she will not be coming, which is a shame. But what I did speak with her about, and she's super happy to do two things. So one of them is I said that we might get together with her or work with her in her office to record a bit of a presentation that then we can send around so that you don't miss out on the information. But she also did ask if I could give the advice that she is super happy to come and talk with your councils, your chambers. She's super happy to come to your region. So if you do want QTIC to really come and talk about what that visitor economy looks like, what the tourism experience is, and what you want it to be and ways to get there, then she's really keen to get out there and really understand the different characteristics and opportunities and challenges that everyone's facing. So she did want me to express that invitation to please get in contact if you'd like her to come out and talk within your region, and we will organise that recording of a presentation and get it to you. So on that note, I will hand over to the much more charming Pete.
Thank you, Nick. It's my pleasure to welcome to the stage now our next speaker, Brooke Williams. Brooke is the founder and director of Fourfold Studio, a recognised placemaking leader with over 14 years' experience. She specialises in revitalising main streets and precincts by aligning councils, communities and small businesses. Brooke facilitates collaborative processes that unlock local identity, support thriving local economies and turn underperforming places into vibrant destinations. Let's welcome Brooke for her reinvigorating place for local economic benefit.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So today I want to talk to you about placemaking, and I think this is a term that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So to give you a little bit of insight about what I'm talking about today, it often helps to just explain a little bit about how I got here. So if I can work this thing, let me see. Here we go. Oh, no. Anyway, that's okay. So my career actually began as a graphic designer, and then I moved on into urban design and then into placemaking. And so why all the change, you might ask? Well, for me, I am like most millennials. I went travelling overseas, and while I was travelling, I was deeply inspired by the life and culture and the vibrancy in the streets and public spaces in many of the places that I travelled. And so when I returned to Australia, I wanted to be a part of the group of people that were impacting our streets and public spaces in our cities and our towns. And so I studied urban design. Whoa, this is very touchy. There we go. We'll just go back and work on that. So I studied urban design, and about fast forward 5 or 6 years later, I realised that something was missing. It still wasn't quite achieving what I'd set out to do. And so I moved into placemaking. So for me, the urban design industry is excellent at solving complex problems and bringing together the complexities of cities and towns. But we almost exclusively focus on those built outcomes, the streets, the parks, the buildings, those public spaces. It's all of the physical infrastructure. And whilst we have that intention for a social and cultural fabric of a city, we don't necessarily have a clear pathway on how to make that happen. And so, and then I think also it's always really long term. So even when it does happen, it takes a long time to get there. And if you are a small business or you are even a community member, you want to see that change now. You want to love your neighbourhood right now, and you need to have that action. And so with a group of, I guess, passionate doers, creatives, small businesses, entrepreneurs, we got out, and for 7 years in the streets and public spaces and underutilised public spaces of Brisbane, we gave it a go. And what we realised was the critical missing ingredient is actually people. The power of all of these stakeholders coming together to achieve a shared goal is incredibly powerful, and it's immediate. And it is an excellent tool for local economic revival. And so Fourfold Studio, I think, Robert, you mentioned you guys kicked off in December 2019. We launched Fourfold Studio on the 1st of April 2020, which was pretty much doomsday lockdown, so up you on that one. But what we do at Fourfold is we bring together the best of both of those worlds. It's about the technical kind of understanding of cities and change and how that happens with that grassroots energy of the businesses and the chambers and the people on the ground that are making it happen. And we took the moment to pause and reflect on the work that we had been delivering about a year ago. And what we realised is that there was sort of 3 buckets or components to the work that we do. There's the deep research component where we really get to know place, and of course that includes deep engagement, but also other studies and research that we undertake. We collaborate with all of our stakeholders and our clients to develop a strategy, but the piece that is the most important is that at every stage in our journey, we are looking at how we can be making it happen. And so the best projects were the ones where we were kicking the goals, or at least the community were, before we'd actually finish writing the strategy. So incredibly powerful. And so it wasn't what we were delivering so much as it was how we were going about it. Now, most of you in the room today, are in the field of economic development. Now, it's really interesting because the work that we do sits across many different departments, and it's different for every single council. What I like and what I thought I would share with you is that many of the projects, of our best projects, actually were delivered by the economic development teams in councils. And I think that this is because you are such great connectors, both with networks internal to council as well as outside. And so you're perfectly well placed to be able to deliver this type of approach. And so what does placemaking have to do with small business? Today, I really want to drill into one component of the work that we do, which is around Main Street and activity centre revitalisation. And what we know is that it's those small businesses, the mums and dad businesses, the local businesses that we've just, Lauren's type of business, that absolutely can change the shape and the thriving nature of these places. So putting them on the map, and it's what we want to share today. Now, I can't imagine there's many of you in the room that wouldn't recognise or be able to resonate with a declining Main Street or activity centre at some stage, at somewhere in your region. Peter Smith is a really well recognised placemaker. He was the CEO in Adelaide and he's now in Victoria, but I've, with his permission, borrowed his diagram, which I think explains it really well, this cycle of decline. You start to have businesses struggling, and you might lose one small business which has to shut its doors. And when you start to get vacancies, your investor confidence drops, and then you get more vacancies. And ultimately what you then end up with is a place that has diminished sense of pride and sense of place. And so what do we do in an industry, and what do we hear from the community when this happens? More often than not is that we need to invest in a makeover. It's because the street looks tired or there's not enough car parking. And so, oh goodness, okay, sorry, there we go, start with that. This is a picture project that I actually worked on as an urban designer. And as designers, we come in and we create these montages. This is a computer-generated image, and of course, there's a lot of people in this image. And we sort of sell this promise of, yes, great, spend all this money, it's going to turn this town around. But more often than not, or not, at least in many cases, the reality is vastly different. We are not finishing the picture of the puzzle there. So we've brought in the cross-block links. We've thought about the outdoor dining experience. We've got this subtropical green environment that everybody asks for, but for whatever reason, it's not resonating with those local communities, and the businesses aren't taking ownership of the spaces that are there. And so how do we flip this perpetual cycle of decline? For me, it really comes down to two things. The first is that it is a collaborative effort. Everybody has a role to play. The second is one that we tackle in every town that we come across. The bulky shopping centre has stolen the foot traffic and sucked the life out of our centre. If we try to compete with the exact same service offering of a bulky shopping centre, we're never going to win. What we've got as a main street and activity centre is an experience. And Lauren, I really resonated with your presentation because I 100% agree. It's the main streets that focus first on how to create an experience that are the ones that thrive. And to do that, they have to step outside of their businesses and think about what they can do collectively. And so if I was to talk to you, I could tell you many, many benefits of placemaking. But even if I only focus on that value proposition about how placemaking is a tool that can get investor confidence into your communities, into your towns, how it's going to help drive foot traffic and businesses and support each other through this ecosystem, it's such an incredible, powerful tool for local economic change. This is something that the Maroochydore community knew when, for the Ocean Street project, it was in a great decline, and what they did was they ran a whole range of different events and activations, which in turn attracted new businesses, and then that attracted investment from the local council to invest in the streetscape upgrade. ARIA, the property developers, knew this when they turned Fish Lane from a rear kind of rundown service laneway into one of our city's most vibrant public spaces and destinations. And of course, when they did this, they knew that they had land in the area, and by doing this, by investing in the public realm and the place experience of this neighbourhood, they increased the value of that land, and they're now seeing the returns through premiums in their apartments that they've built. Councils, developers, community groups, businesses are all seeing the huge value in what placemaking can do to really turn your town around. Everything from fostering new businesses to helping drive visitation through to increasing the tourism appeal of your town, and of course aligning the investment that you want to see happen. And so today I'm going to talk to you and share with you 3 quick case studies. I've purposefully chosen 3 that are different in scale because this isn't an approach that's one size fits all. It's not about your population, and it's actually not about your budget. There's different ways that you can apply this technique, and it works. So the first of these projects, I've been talking to Susan from Western Downs Regional Council for a lot of today. This actually takes place in Miles, which is about 4 hours west of Brisbane, with a population of 2,000 people. And this is a bit of an older project for us. But in this case, Miles is situated on the intersection of the Leichhardt and the Warrego Highway. Lots of big, kind of vehicle movement going through the town, and our goal and our objective on this project was really clear. We needed to get people to slow down, to stop in the town, and to support those local businesses, to see what this town has to offer. And so, as a project team, we set ourselves with an ambitious goal to not only do that, but turn this into a tourism destination for the region. And so, to be able to do that, we worked very, very closely with this local community, with the local businesses, to understand what was it that made them unique? What did they love about their town, their community, their history? How could we retell and bring to life those local stories? And we did just that, working really closely with the landscape architects, with local creatives. We've got a digital storytelling trail. And so when you walk down the streets of Miles these days, that in itself is an experience. And of course, more people doing that, more people pausing and moving slowly down that street, they're then supporting all of those local businesses. We worked really closely even with the businesses to see how they could reorient themselves and actually activate, put outdoor dining on this street, on this highway that we were told would never ever happen, and now it does. So it's an incredible win. But one of my favourite stories with this one is that Cooper's, the beer company, we found out a couple of years ago that they actually went on an Australia-wide hunt for the perfect town for their campaign and chose Miles, which we thought was a bit of a win because that certainly would not have happened before this project was finished. Now, my second project here takes place in Mackay. Is there anyone here from Mackay? You're ex-Mackay. You'll know some of these stories then. Yeah, great. Okay. Now, Mackay, for those of you that know, you'd be familiar with a PDA. They've got a PDA in their city centre and their waterfront area. So their long-term planning is in place. Strategic planning, they know where they want to go. That's all sorted. But we were brought in because they were struggling to build that momentum, and certainly for the community and the businesses on the ground, they weren't seeing anything. We got the plan in place, but what does that actually mean to us? Not much. And a lot of them didn't even know that it was in place. And so as consultants, sorry about that, I know that sometimes consultants but it can be, I guess we're only there for a short time. And so we really need to think about that and think about how we can make the greatest value for these communities in that short period of time that we are on that in town and on that project. And so there's a whole range of different passionate, invested people in these communities before we even step off the plane or drive into this community. And we need to canvass those people. We need to support them, work with them, help them align their goals and align them to council, connect them with council's existing programs and mentorship. And so with the goal of stepping away and working ourselves out of a job. So in any project, it really is about what can we be doing to make sure that when we step away from the process, the strategy or the streetscape or whatever it is we're delivering is owned and loved and being delivered by those local people who are on the ground and will be there moving forward. And so when we put together this activation strategy or place strategy for Mackay, we could have gone down that route of a council-led program of activations, which would have had certainty to a degree, but we know that that's not sustainable in the long term. And it certainly doesn't get everybody involved and passionate and amplify the impact that we know is possible when everyone gets involved. And so we worked very, very closely to get to know the local community, the local businesses, to understand what their challenges were. And a lot of those times it was little things like permitting and licensing that council could overcome. We got to know the businesses and their particular goals, and so that when council were delivering activations, they knew that it was actually aligning and that these other businesses could jump on board and have those sort of guaranteed wins. One of my favourite stories, I don't know if you can see it, but the girls in the top food truck here, they actually came along to one of our ideation workshops and shared their dream of developing a food company that celebrated their family's Filipino recipes. And they'd had this idea for years, but they just didn't know how to get it going. And so we connected them in with council. Council gave them some mentoring and support through their existing programs. We then offered them a kind of guaranteed foot traffic free license to give it a go at an event. It was a 3-day event that we were running as part of the engagement and as a tactical trial of what could be happening in this place. And so within the 6 months between the workshop and running the event, the girls actually had hired their food truck, they developed up their recipes, they created their branding, and they were there for 3 days, hugely successful, so much so that they've now gone ahead and they've got a permanent food truck and it's their their permanent job. So they've made that happen, which is incredible to see that sort of thing happen. Another story is these business owners here who cited after the strategy, they were heavily involved the whole way through as well, that it was being a part of that really collaborative process that gave them the confidence to invest in expanding their business, knowing not only that council supported them, but also that the community wanted to see this happen and would support that business. So really, really powerful stuff to see that happen for those communities. For my final case study, this one really is, I talk to a lot of people in economic development, and I know you don't always get that capital works budget. And so my advice here is always to piggyback off the big projects when they're happening, any big project, because there is always a way that you can apply this approach to take over the community engagement component and get something for your small businesses. And so to explain why I think this approach is really, really powerful, I'm going to borrow a story from the tech industry. Now, I hope my clicker works because this is a pivotal moment of clickerness. So if you are, in this instance, building a car, and the first thing that you do in a waterfall process is you start with a wheel, and you move into an axle, and then you have the body of the car, and then, ta-da, you've got a car. Now, the second approach is an agile approach, but in an agile approach, you don't start with a wheel, you actually start with a skateboard. And you put the skateboard out to the market and you see what your customers think. You test it out, you watch, you observe, you see what they're doing. And so then the second time you do your next release, it's a scooter, because you've realised that actually more people can use a scooter. It's a little more accessible, it's easier to balance. You've broadened your market, you've broadened your demographic of use. And then the next product might be a bike, and then a motorbike, and then finally you move into a car. Now, in the waterfall approach, the customer or the user hasn't really got to enjoy this particular product until right at the end of the process. Whereas in an agile process, at every step of the way, we've been able to increase the amount of people that are attached at loving this place and using and taking part in this place, this product. And so then if we think about that in terms of a main street revitalisation, what does an integrated approach look like for a main street revitalisation? Now, for those of you who have gone through this process, you'll know that for the town, it is absolutely a win. But for the small businesses that front that street, it can be pretty scary. They're looking at the barrel of 6 to 12 months of disruption. They're worried that they're not even going to survive that process. And that's a really real thing. And so thinking about how we can bring them on that journey, back one, right from the outset, we need to get them on board, build that excitement and help them understand not only how they can mitigate the construction impacts, but what's in it for them and how they can get the most value out of this at every step of the journey. And so while the designers in the orange down the bottom there are doing their site analysis, we're in with those community members and those businesses really cleverly and deeply engaging about what their point of difference is, co-designing a vision with them, hand in hand. While the concept design is underway, we're thinking about how we can integrate art and stories or really unpack what that place experience is and bring that to life. We're thinking about how we might test and trial a concept to not only get the community over the line, which often is necessary with parking changes or streetscape changes, but also how, as a business, they're going to engage with that new space, those new spaces and streetscape arrangement once it's been built. And the best thing about this is that at every stage of this journey, we've been building relationships. We've been connecting these businesses to council and to their communities. We've been connecting them to each other. And so by the time we get to the end of the project and it's built, we have this entire ecosystem of innovation in place management where things are starting to happen and flourish in their own way. So it's a really, really powerful way to keep everybody on board. You can come up with strategies on how with the businesses on how they can stay open and survive that construction period just by having those regular touch points. There we go. And so in my last case study, what could have been an aspirational vision, this was a project that took place in Grafton. It was the downgrading of their main street, which was state-owned street, into a local street. And so as part of that process, they had to do a precinct plan. There wasn't any sort of capital works committed to being actually able to deliver that project, but the idea was to do the planning and hopefully eventually get the funding for that project. And there wasn't a call for engagement with businesses or much engagement with stakeholders, but we put forward a different approach, and we worked hand in hand with the Chamber of Commerce, with all of the local businesses, with all of the departments in council to come up with a really compelling strategy about how they could reactivate their main street. And in doing so, we were able to build enough energy around a number of actions that really weren't reliant on any changes taking place to the actual physical infrastructure of the street. And so as a result, we started to see that change happening. And then the opportunity came up through the New South Wales state government did the Streets as Shared Spaces grant, and we were successful off the back of the engagement with all of the documentation that we had in securing an additional $500,000, which then went back out to those community groups and to all the different council teams, and they collectively collaborated to temporarily transform their street to see, test and trial what they could possibly do. And the really interesting thing is that you walk down this street now and there's no vacancies anymore. It's full of personality, it's full of colour, there's art in the street. The local businesses will talk to you when you go in there and recommend other businesses. They'll tell you what you should go and see. They'll share the story of their town. And that in itself has revitalised this town without any major capital works spend to date. One quick story I will tell, I think I'm probably running out of time, but is you can see, I think, in your top corner there, the AstroTurf picture. So I imagine you've probably got this in many of your towns across the region, but this rear-in angle parking situation, which they had in Prince Street. Now, it was very controversial, but we were trying to improve the pedestrian environment. So you had retail on both sides of the street. We wanted to make it better for the people to walk up and down the street. And to do that, we wanted to widen the footpath. And so we knew that this was going to be controversial, that the community was going to find this change very hard to wrap their heads around. And so we worked really closely with one of the local businesses who wasn't normally open on a Friday afternoon. We built that cheaply, very, very cheaply, borrowed materials and kind of just threw it together. And this business opened every single Friday night for a month doing beers and burgers. So new audiences coming in. Facebook, when we first did this, because we also then reoriented the car parking for that block, Facebook absolutely blew up. There was a barrage of negative commentary. But by the end of the month-long trial, we had far more supporters and absolutely no negative feedback come through when we put the concept design out. And so then when we got the $500,000 grant from Streets as Shared Spaces, we were able to do what you can see in the next image down, which is actually a temporary fix to that footpath widening, and it runs all the way along the street now. And as far as I know, still in place. So incredible at changing people's mindsets. Yep. So what connects all of these projects? It really is that through that research strategy and, very importantly, action approach, we're able to catalyse change right now. And so my final 3 takeaways for councils is that you need to leverage your assets. And we always hear about the things that people don't want to celebrate or they're embarrassed by. I always recommend that you really dig deep into that and see if you can't turn that into something that's a positive for your town, because people already know you for it, so own it, would be my advice. Everybody has a role to play, and as council, your best bet is to be the enabler. Don't try to deliver the activations and drive the energy on your own. Spend your time and energy and effort supporting others to do their best work. And finally, the journey is as important, and if not more important, than the output. It really is about that process. So front load your engagement whenever possible. Get everybody on board. Bring them with you on the journey, because in doing this, you're going to unlock the secrets to creating thriving, well-loved main streets and activity centres. Thank you. probably ran out of time for questions, did I? Happy to take some if not. Nope, good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I found that fascinating, and I'm sure everyone else in the room did. As I have been travelling around Queensland, it's probably not astonishing, but almost every conversation I have in a different region with different councils are around, key things around main streets, around CBD activation, and how do you keep people involved, engaged and committed. And I think that those examples there will give something that resonates with everyone in the room, regardless of how big or small your budget and your council may be. So thanks so much, appreciate it. I now have the privilege of emceeing a panel, so I will call the members individually up to take a seat. So first we have, and we've already heard from Lorith, but we have Lorith Rumble from Reef Distillers. We also have Jason Foss from Capricornia Chamber of Commerce. And we have Christy Marks from Gladstone Regional Council. And I do just need to give a heads up that Christy does have an unavoidable meeting that she has to jump onto. So if she suddenly exits stage left, you'll understand why. Thanks, everyone. So, it's not on? It is on. Says it's on. There we go. Just had to give it a little bit of time. So the title of today's panel is Working Together, Better Together, What Business and Government Need from Each Other. So what we want to have is an honest conversation. It's perspectives from business, from chambers, and from government to explore how do we move beyond frustration and towards solutions. This is about understanding what gets in the way, what's working, and what we can all do better together. So I have a couple of questions, but hopefully I'll manage time accordingly that people can also ask questions if need be. So, Christy, knowing that you may have to jump off, I'll start with you. What are some examples of practical things your council has done to support regional businesses that genuinely has made an impact, and how did they come about?
Thanks, Nicole. One of the initiatives that we've recently undertaken, and we're from a Gladstone Council perspective, we were one of the latter joiners of the Small Business Friendly program. So we've only been a program member for almost 18 months now, coming into 2 years, I believe it would be in August. So we had we were starting from grassroots level when it came from small business. We have a very small but mighty economic development team, so it's myself and 2 others. So from a region our size of over 4,000 businesses, 68,000 population, we are a very small team, largely designed to support concierge services for major industry, which Gladstone is very well renowned for. So from our council's perspective, we needed to go, well, what are some of those really big rocks for small businesses to overcome? And we worked really closely with our procurement team because we know that often procurement is one of those big hurdles for small businesses to be able to tap into council and therefore the broader supply chain. And there's copies of this out the back as well. But we worked with our procurement team to do a really simple information booklet, which is doing business with Gladstone Regional Council. Now, that seems so basic, but the impact that it has made to make our small businesses stop having to call up our customer service line to go, what do I need to do if I wanted to start a business? What do I need to do if I wanted to get onto a tender for our panels? All of the information is literally in a one-stop shop and replicated on our website. And we begged, borrowed and stole all of the ideas from folks in this room, right? So it's not as though we're recreating the wheel. But being able to have something really simple to be able to pass out to our local businesses and go, here is everything that you need to know, but equally, here's a page of all your contacts and the people that you need to speak to. And we all know that businesses are time poor. They just want to be able to pick up the phone or send an email to go, someone help me. And that's been a really, really impactful piece for us. So really, really proud of this particular work, particularly working with our procurement team who are absolute guns in supporting this space. So it makes a big difference.
Well done. That is amazing. And sometimes I know in state government and in government at all levels, I think because you do it day in, day out, you forget that people who don't do it day in, day out find it quite confusing and quite difficult to try and talk to who they need to talk to or find a one-stop shop of all the information. So, that is really important for small business owners. So now we're going to move on to you, Jason. Queensland regions are really diverse. There's no one size fits all. So what role do chambers play in supporting the unique challenges of small businesses in your region, but also just any general observations?
Yeah, I think is this one working? Yep. This probably applies across the board, I suppose, but speaking specifically from our local experience, I find that small businesses are probably universally affected by all of the same things. It doesn't really matter where you go. But one thing we do find is the priorities of those things tend to vary from location to location and region to region. So what I hear Yeppoon businesses telling me about is not the same thing that's really pushing Rocky businesses' buttons at the moment. And then Gracemere, it's something different again. And, the list is probably the same, but the order of what's important in that spot at that time is different. So being on the ground, talking to people directly can help you sort of prioritise, well, where do you need to spend your time, where do you need to spend your effort and your energy? So that's a really important part. But the other thing too, and that doesn't get spoken about a lot, is that for a lot of small business owners, you can feel really isolated, like you don't necessarily have a lot of people to talk to. You can really much feel like you're on your own. And during COVID, mental health became a really big issue and burnout and things like that. And we find that just, getting a bunch of people in the room who are also, facing the same issues and the same hurdles can be really good. And I've seen examples of this happen quite a lot, where people have been able to talk to somebody else who's in the same boat and all of a sudden feel a bit better about where they are and what their path moving forward might be.
Thank you. And it is a really important role that chambers and also peak organisations and industry groups play in amplifying, and we always say when we're talking with small businesses, please contact us directly, of course, and give us those examples of red tape or, my role, luckily, is to be a bit of a stone in the shoe to sort of wherever those pain points are. But by really connecting in with those chambers, and it's such a good amplification of those voices. So, we certainly do it, and I'm sure you do in your local councils as well, but it is a really key source of information, I think, that we get from chambers and the like. So thank you. Lorith, as a small business, what's the key message that you think councils and chambers need to hear?
I think it's really important to, when a council or a chamber thinks about how to enhance the business environment in their local towns, to look at really where the frustrations are. I think, for instance, just a recent example I have is we work with quite a few local farmers and we make products for them. So we take the produce, we make the spirits. They would like to sell that, for instance, at their farm gates. But in Queensland, that's not possible. In Tasmania, it is. So Tasmania's got this culture of people going around the farms and buying the products because there's a licensing that allows that, where in Queensland we don't have it. So it's just little things that I think are holding businesses thriving. It's preventing us from thriving. It's preventing, and it's such a small little thing that can be done. So I think it's having conversations with business owners, maybe once a month, once a quarter, and saying, what are the issues you're experiencing at the moment that we can assist with? It's very hard for us sometimes to find the information that we need. I go onto the government websites and I'm just going around in circles. The other day I was looking for an export license. I filled in the questionnaire and then I pressed submit and it sent my inquiry to the dairy export. And the dairy wrote back saying, you're in the wrong department. And I was like, but I went through the proper website channel. I went through your website, but I ended up with dairy. So it's just little things that become really frustrating and waste a lot of our time.
Yeah, I think once again that's a key message coming through, isn't it, around what can we do to simplify? And part of that is really, as best we can, we've heard some great examples today of co-creating or really making sure that we're talking with the customer, who's the end user of these things. Sometimes, we sort of sit and it makes sense to us because we designed it and we know the process and it seems very, very logical. And I think it's really key to get in the small businesses or the people who will be actually using it to see, well, does it actually make sense? Did you end up where you needed to, or did you end up with the dairy?
No, I'm still busy with that process. Yeah. I did notice today there was a talk by Denise for the new export hub, I think. So I logged onto that today and registered. So hopefully I'll get my answer in the next few weeks. Yeah, but for instance,
crossed.
I emailed the liquor licensing 6 weeks ago asking a question about expanding our license because we've got this tourism grant and building the tasting room, and I need to just change a few small things in our license. They wrote me an email 3 weeks later saying, we're looking at your request, we'll reply within the next 28 days. And I'm like, I don't have 7 weeks to wait. I want to open this tasting room at the end of June. That's a ridiculous amount of time to wait for an answer.
And that's, I think, sometimes within this room we may be preaching to the converted, but that's our roles, within state government, my role and my team's role, but also within your councils, within your organisation. It's really important to be carrying these messages back that timeliness is critical, and to take 3 months to respond, 3 months, 3 weeks, to respond to an email just doesn't work from a business perspective. So I think we need to be those critical friends to ourselves, but also within our organisations as well.
Can I add a little bit to that, Nicole? Thank you. To your point, it's so important that us as economic development practitioners, particularly in that local council world, building that coalition of the willing within your internal departments is so important. And I know that all of you out there, to your point, we're preaching to the converted, but golly me, the amount of conversations that I continue to have, not only from our local council perspective, but other government agencies around planning and assessment, and to your point, the time constraints that a lot of our businesses are dealing with, whether it's small businesses, whether it's major industry around enabling infrastructure, it's all bottlenecks, and sometimes it's there for really good reason, but sometimes it can be really avoided, and it brings that customer service lens and reminding people that, these are the impacts that truly come from either not responding in a timely manner or not thinking outside the box in terms of how do we make it happen, and having that yes if approach as opposed to just because we've always done the same thing that we've always done and it's a hard no. And that's hard work. It's hard work trying to drive that change, but it's very impactful.
I was just going to add to that. When the state government first launched the red tape survey drive, we asked a bunch of members, what examples of red tape have you got? And there weren't that many specific examples of red tape, but a message that I heard all the time was how long it took. Just extending what you were saying there, it just takes so long to get a response or get an approval or get a rejection or get anything. But in the meantime, you're sitting there in limbo. You can't move forward, you can't make a plan B, you just... so that was not the red tape itself, but just the time it took to get an answer was a problem.
It is a bit of a theme that we're seeing in that what people think is red tape, sometimes it's not red tape, so it doesn't need a reg or ledge change, it's process improvement. And so it's often driven by not really thinking about the customer and the timeframes and what they need and the impact it will have on their business if they're not responded to in a timely fashion. But also the nature of government is to work in silos. And so sometimes we're expecting or demanding of small business owners to, for example, they might have to deal with 4 different organisations to come out and do a physical check before they can approve something. And those happen in 4 different silos often. So a small business owner has to deal with 4 different scary visits from government, when if government probably looked at our process a bit better, everyone could go out at the same time. So sometimes it is just that process improvement. I think, Laura, you also made an important point that maybe we can consider how we could get better. Sometimes we sort of think, oh, we have to be the font of knowledge to small businesses, and often we do because they need information from us. But small businesses out there have really different, diverse experiences that I don't know that we seek enough of that information. So that example of, well, this can happen in Tasmania, well, then that information needs to be fed back for us to be considering, so why can't it happen here if it happens in Tasmania? So I have a final question for all of the panel, and then we may have time for a couple, so please do think of a question of this expertise you have on stage. So the title of this session is Working Better Together: What Business and Government Need from Each Other. What are the most effective partnerships you've seen in this space, and why did they work?
I'll go first. Yeah. Look, particularly from a Gladstone perspective, we're really fortunate that we have really strong industry organisations and a local chamber. So we've got at least 4, colloquially, all the Gs. So we even have Cal Devney in the back here, who sits on the board of Gladstone Engineering Alliance, one of our major industry organisations supporting heavy industry, engineering, manufacturing. We also have our chambers. We have our GAPDL, which is our regional tourism organisation. And I can say without fail, the collaboration that we see within the organisations from a council perspective, it makes or breaks us. From a reputation perspective, from impact that we see on the ground with our tourism sector or our, butchers, bakers, news agencies and the like that comes from the chamber, but also supporting from our heavy industry sector and our major global corps that sit within the Gladstone region. Those industry organisations are critical to being able to support our local supply chain. So it doesn't necessarily need to be finance support from council, because funding doesn't necessarily solve all the problems. It's really about understanding what they need to continue their sustainability and to drive impact. And that's different for every single one of those organisations because they have a different audience and a different membership group. But I think it's just about having a really open dialogue and transparent conversation about what they need, what's practical from a ratepayer dollar base, and where our councils want to necessarily put the relevant funding into support, whether it's local supply chain uplift or whether it's supporting industry or the like, and recognising that councils have very, very diverse needs, whether it's community assets, whether it's roads, and we've spoken about it all day. It's, we are not regulated under the Local Government Act to exist from an economic development perspective. So we are technically a nice to have. We all know we're not a nice to have, we are a must have. So how do we make sure that we have organisations in our regions actually banging on that drum as well to say this is really important, and how do we work together more proactively in that space?
I think I'd plus one that. We have really good working relationships with both local councils, with Rockhampton and Livingston. We're in regular communication with them, meet with mayors or economic development departments fairly often, and so that working relationship was really good. We collaborate with Capricorn Enterprise, and Mary's in the room here for a Business Excellence Awards. So I think the key is just communication is really the bottom line. I mean, you mentioned silos in government before. Silos can happen between chambers and industry organisations and all the other bits and pieces that are going on as well, which to me it's a complete waste of time and duplication of effort. It's insane. So there's individual projects along the way, but the key thing is just stay in touch with whatever you're doing, because we all want the same outcome. Like, we all want the same thing. So that would be my thing. Just talk regularly.
I think, like you said, communication is really important. Whenever we hit a roadblock, we know that, we go and speak to Mary at Capricorn Enterprise, and she's connected to the council, and there's such a good relationship always between all the members of that organisation and that representative organisation and council, that we can sort out issues fairly quickly. I did notice we worked in the Whitsundays for a while, and that was a very different experience for us compared to working in the Livingston Shire Council. The Livingston Shire Council seems way more connected and grounded. Things get done much quicker, decisions can be made a little bit faster, and problems are solved quite quickly. So I really like that collaborative networking, having good communication, knowing each other, because you just get a lot further, a lot quicker. Things get solved really quickly.
Awesome, thank you. So I think, and I will ask for questions in a second, but I think we've seen and heard some really key themes here around collaboration, genuine collaboration. And I think that there's also a good point around, I guess, not singing each other's praises, but giving credit where it's due. And I think that, where areas are working well together, if you're championing, this happened really well, then not just from for example, council understanding our economic development team are really kicking goals, and so they, that's a good thing that you've invested in them and you need to keep doing that. But also, councils hearing people talk about chambers and small businesses talking about councils and chambers, and then vice versa, the promotion of small businesses. So I think that genuine collaboration, it takes effort and it takes time, and you can't do it by just running a couple of events, so it's not a lip service kind of thing, but the impact from it, I think, leads to that really genuine small business friendly environment that we're all hoping to achieve. So thanks. Any questions? Yes, Brooke.
Thank you. Possibly for you, Stephen. It's great. I see in towns how fantastic it is when the chamber and the council have a really great relationship. In the instances where they don't, have you seen any good strategies around how to bring them back together and align the two?
Well, I haven't, because I guess in my time in this role, we've been lucky enough to always be in that position of having good relationships. I don't think it's a secret. There's been times where our two local councils haven't had good relationships with each other. And the only way that kind of got solved was changes at the top, unfortunately, after elections. But I don't really have any advice on it, because we've been pretty lucky for my time in this role.
If I could add to that, Brooke, I'm also privileged that we've not had a problem with that in the past either, or at least since I've been in Gladstone. But what I can say is it's not lost, I think, on any of us how hard it is for chambers and industry organisations to run, particularly when they have voluntary board members. It's really hard yakka out there. And when those organisations don't necessarily have paid people within the organisation, that's when it starts becoming quite challenging in terms of, well, how do we continue those operations and how do we continue that momentum? Even from a council perspective, working with those relationships to go, well, how can we best help when you may not necessarily have a warm body out there doing all the events and the awards and all of those types of things. So I think it doesn't necessarily answer your relationship problem, for want of a better term, but I think from a local government perspective, it's understanding that those organisations are always going to ebb and flow depending on who's in the position, whether it's a paid position or a board position at whichever point in time, but not necessarily rely on those personalities at the time. Like, how do you think about it in a more strategic and sustainable way to make sure no matter who's in the role or what personalities or what behaviours are driving the output at the end of the day, it's only a blip in time. It's 6 months, it's 12 months, maybe it's 18 months, but that being able to push through and go, right, well, we might not be able to support with a large amount of funding if there's not a warm body in that seat, but how can we help and think outside the box in other ways as well? So it's, I think, relationships are funny and they're always going to be funny. So it's like, how do you just work your way through it?
Okay, we have time for one more question.
This is just a question for Lauren. You mentioned before that you were previously in the Whitsundays. Were you operating the same kind of business, and was that part of the reason not having success there that you decided to move to Livingston? I'm just looking at a perspective of investment and opportunity of that support for the food and ag. And going through those processes, because I have worked up there with Whitsunday, so I do understand where you're coming from that food and ag perspective. So I was just wondering if that was a reason for the move or not.
We were in tourism. We've been in tourism since 2008, so we always were in Livingston first, and this was our experience of working in this field. And I have to say that we've been a member of our local tourism organisation or regional tourism organisation since the very beginning. So that was really our first experience of working in the tourism industry. We then in 2019 purchased a cyclone-damaged resort on Long Island and renovated that, rebuilt it and launched it in 2019 as a Lycian retreat. So we worked up there with the regional tourism organisation, the council, and doing business in the Whitsundays is tough. I think it's always about the big players. There's a lot of greediness, I'm just calling it out for what it is, and money grabbing, and so it's not a very small business friendly place to operate in. We did sell that resort in 2022. We were successful, we made a great success of the business, but up against all odds, it was probably the toughest business we've had to run.
Telling it like it is, absolutely.
I have to be honest.
No,
I'm sorry.
absolutely. No, absolutely. That's what we want from the discussions today, because
Yeah.
it's not easy out there, and things.
No, and it's harder when people make it harder for you, and very much up there that's the case.
Yeah, and so people need to hear the reality so
Yeah.
that hopefully changes can be made where they need to be.
I hope so, yeah.
So thanks. And you look like you were going to say something, Jason.
Oh, it was sort of tangentially related.
here we go.
Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
You don't have much time though.
Okay, I'll make it really quick. I guess if there's one message to the room, I'm going to use a rugby league analogy here to make my point. So half the room will understand what I'm saying and half the room will go to sleep. Sorry about that. But sometimes when you're, as a small business owner, when you're dealing with council or with government, it feels like the ref is blowing his whistle for every minor infringement in the run of play. Whoops, you're offside 5 centimetres, blow the whistle. Ooh, 1 centimetre offside there, blow the whistle. There are times where there are some rules that you can't break. Like if I put my foot in a touch, I'm out. That's a rule. We all understand that. But there's lots of decisions get made and applications and permits and that sort of thing. It just feels like the ref's blowing his whistle because you're this much over the line and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, honestly, and it does feel a lot like that. Like you've just got this this whistle-happy ref, and in the grand scheme of things, the approval, the rejection, whatever, doesn't change anything in the big picture. But it sometimes just feels like council's out to make it difficult. And I think Brooke mentioned removing friction before. He mentioned permits. So sometimes I think council just needs to get out of the way.
Yeah, I think there's been a range of conversations, not just today, but since my time in the role around, often councils, state government, etc., the people are trying to do the right thing, but they're managing to the highest level of risk, and so therefore they're putting a lot of compliance on that's not necessarily needed. And so I think it's that challenging ourselves to not have that one size fits all. It's like, what is the risk here? What is fit for purpose? What should we be doing if we want to support small business to genuinely challenge our processes and ourselves? Linda and I were saying this morning, wouldn't it be great if we just actually set compliance for small business and went, what's the minimum you need for the lowest level of risk? And then put more compliance on the big guys rather than compliance be set at the higher level, and then you get exclusions or exemptions down. So we're like, yeah, let's do that. So anyway, that's our goal for next week. Look, we have taken up a bit of time, so please join me in thanking the panel for your insights and your honesty.
Thanks so much to our panel. Thank you, Nick. Thank you to Lorith and Jason and Christy. Really appreciate your views. Definitely one of the things I'm going to talk about in my presentation a little later on is that sense of what Jason was saying about the whistle-happy ref. So it'll be interesting to talk that through a little bit more. But it's my pleasure now to introduce Paul. Paul Cranch is a Brisbane-based economic development professional writer and best-selling author. dedicated to helping regions building, regions building long-term prosperity. With experience across local government, advocacy and community engagement, he focuses on empowering future leaders and strengthening local economies through strategy, partnerships and practical insights. And he's going to talk about economic detectives, following the money to unlock local opportunity. All right, let's welcome Paul.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I want to talk about something every region experiences, but very few regions properly measure, and that's economic leakage. Money leaving the local economy. That can sound technical, but for councils, chambers and economic development professionals, leakage is much more practical than that. It's a clue. It tells us what our community needs, but cannot find locally. It tells us where residents are travelling for services, what local businesses are buying from outside the region, and it tells us where online spending is replacing local spending. So today I want to frame leakage differently. Leakage is not just about money leaving, it's intelligence. And if we follow the money properly, we can find opportunity. So the core idea is simple. Every dollar spent elsewhere leaves a clue. Sometimes that clue is about a business that already exists, but is not visible enough. Sometimes it's about a price, range, quality, or convenience. And sometimes it points to something bigger, a missing service, a weak local offer, or the way we designed our towns, suburbs, or regions. This is where councils and chambers need to think less like promoters and more like economic detectives. Because if someone is regularly leaving our region to spend money, the first response should not be guilt, it should be curiosity. Why did they leave? What were they looking for? Could that demand be captured locally? That's the detective work. One mistake we make is treating leakage as failure. We say people are spending outside the region, that's bad. But some leakage is normal. No community can provide everything. People will always travel for specialist services, major purchases, family commitments, holidays and experience that are not available locally. The real problem is not leakage, the real problem is unmeasured leakage. Because when we do not measure leakage, we guess. We guess why people are shopping elsewhere, what businesses are missing, whether a buy local campaign is working. And we guess, when we guess, we often jump to promotion. But the first job is not promotion. The first job should be diagnosis. So the better questions are, why is spending leaving? Can we influence it? And what will we need to change for more of that spending to stay? Most councils already measure parts of the local economy: business numbers, visitor numbers, vacancy rates, employment, etc. All of these are important, but for most of these indicators tell us what exists. They do not always tell us what is escaping. They tell us how many businesses we have, but not what residents wish they had. They tell us what economy looks like, but not always how people behave. And behaviour is where leakage shows up. So the data we already collect matters, but we also need to understand spending behaviour, supply chains, procurement, service gaps, online spending, and how people actually move through the region. That is where the clues are. This matters because the geography of work, spending, and community life is changing. More people are working from home or closer to home, and more people are spending time in their local community during the day. That should be good news for local economies. But online spending is growing, and it means more money can bypass the local economy. So we now have a strange situation. More people are physically present, but more spending can leave. That's the challenge, and that is also the opportunity. But if the local economy does not spend, that spending will go elsewhere. Online, to the next major centre, or wherever the offer is easier, better, faster, or more visible. A community should not just be a place where people sleep before going somewhere else. It should be a place where they live, learn, work, connect, access services, raise families, participate in sport, start businesses, and belong. That is economic development. Oops, sorry. Okay, so I think there's 6 types of leakage. When people hear about leakage, they often think about retail. Retail matters, but leakage is much broader than retail. There are 6 types of leakage councils and chambers should pay attention to. That's the obvious one, household spending leakage, where you go and spend for groceries, etc. Then you have business supply chain leakage, businesses sourcing materials, professional services, and other things from outside the region. Workforce leakage. This is where your workforce may not be local, but coming into the region and not spending in your region, or the other way around. Your workforce, your local people are actually moving outside the region and spending their money elsewhere. Then you have visitor leakage. Are you getting enough money out of the people who are visiting your region? You have the procurement leakage, which is through councils, and then digital leakage. That's the online retail work and services. The point is this: leakage is not just about people buying shoes, groceries, or coffee elsewhere. It's about how value moves through, around, and out of your local economy. Leakage shows up where value is escaping. But more importantly, it shows us where opportunity might exist. So how do we map leakage? Start by following behaviour before designing intervention. There are 4 practical steps. First, map spending categories. Where do we have strong local supply? Where do we have weak local supply? And where do we have no local supply at all? Second, map the local business base. What businesses actually exist locally? Not just by industry, by function. A business directory is not just a promotional tool. It should be a leakage detection tool. If people cannot see local suppliers, they often assume they don't exist. Third, ask why people and businesses spend elsewhere. Ask residents and businesses why they spend elsewhere and what they need to change for them to spend more locally. That is where the real insight sits. Different causes need different responses. No local provider means a business attraction opportunity. Poor visibility means a promotion issue. Tender requirements mean a capability building exercise. Poor access may mean a planning or infrastructure issue. Fourth, map movement patterns. Where are people going for sport, work, health, education, or other services? Leakage often follows movement. If parents are taking children to sport outside the region, then spending follows. If workers commute elsewhere, coffee, lunch, fuel, errands, etc., often follow. If a suburb has housing but no local centre, spending leaks by design. That is why planning and economic development cannot be separated. You do not need perfect data to start. Use what you have, then test it with local conversations. Keep asking, where is money leaving? Why is it leaving? Can we influence it? And what would we need to change? So buy local campaigns. Buy local campaigns can be very valuable. They build pride, they increase visibility, they remind people that local businesses matter, but we need to be honest about what they can and cannot do. A poster, a hashtag, a media release will not fix leakage on its own. They may create awareness, but awareness is not the same as behaviour change. So every buy local campaign should be treated as a learning exercise. The better question is, what did the campaign teach us about behaviour, gaps and demand? That is the shift. A buy local campaign should not just tell people to buy local, it should help us understand what would making buy local easier, better and more natural. That is when a campaign becomes intelligence. Once we understand leakage, we can turn it into opportunity. There are 4 main responses. First, supporting existing businesses. Sometimes the business already exists, but is not capturing the demand. It may be better to have some visibility, a stronger digital presence, different opening hours, tendering support, or help collaborating with other businesses. Second, fill missing services. If residents are consistently leaving for allied health, recreation, specialist retail, training or professional services, that is not just leakage. That is a business attraction signal. Third, improve procurement pathways. If local businesses are missing out on council, government or major projects or institutional spending, ask why. Fourth, shape better local centres. This is the long-term opportunity. Leakage is often built into the design of places. Housing without local centres creates leakage. Suburbs without land for employment creates leakage. So leakage is not only a small business issue, it's a planning issue, it's a community issue, and an economic development issue. Sorry. So I think one of the big opportunities for councils is to focus more on the local living economy. This is the economy that is created when people spend more on their everyday life close to home, live locally, learn locally, work locally, connect locally, and spend locally, and have a feeling of belonging. These things are often treated separately. If we look at in councils, planning looks at land use, economic development looks at business, community development looks at belonging, infrastructure teams look at assets. But residents don't live their lives in council departments, they experience place as a whole. When the local offer is strong, more money has a reason to stay. When the local offer is weak, leakage is designed into the community. So perhaps the real opportunity is not simply to tell people to buy local, it is to understand what would make buy local easier and more natural. Because the goal is not to trap every dollar, the goal is to give more dollars a reason to stay. Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's thank Paul, everybody. Yeah, thank you so much again. And it doesn't seem long since we've been at lunch, but it's actually afternoon tea time, and then we'll go straight into some sessions after that. So we're going to reconvene here at about 3:10, and then we'll get straight into our afternoon sessions then. Just a reminder, TJ still has some spots available if you do need to get to the airport. So we'll leave as soon as we're packed up and ready after conference ends, and be heading out to the airport on the bus. So make sure you go and see her. All right, thanks everyone. 3:10. We'll see you then.